Here we are again for chapter 6, I believe, and I'm excited. I'm quite enjoying the book. It's been fun. Um, so before we get started, I'm gonna do my thing that I do, and if you want to put in the chat what you had for dinner, I made fresh French bread, and it was so yummy. And I ate some. How you take it out of the oven and it's hot, and you cut it and you put butter on, and it just melts into it, and it's so good. Yeah, that was good. And then after that, I made some garlic toast, and we had garlic toast with clam chowder. I made a clam chowder garlic toast. It was so good. It was yum. And then we had I was gonna make some buttermilk buns, or they're for people who know, they know what buttermilk buns are, but it's kind of something we had in our community. A lot of people shared the recipe. It's kind of like a coffee cake, a little bit different. It's really good. I was gonna make that, but we still had a few Nanaimo bars, so I decided not to make more sweets until we finished the ones we already had. So I didn't make a dessert today. And then I do want to show off a couple of my little items that I have that I made. I have a cute little bracelet here. Kind of show that up. I don't know how well you can see. I wonder if my camera probably needs cleaned. But those are little tiny real flowers in there. So cute. And then they have the resin on top. So it's a really cute little pink bracelet. And this, which I love this thing. So it's just like a, decorative shell sitter, and you can see it has all those really cool seashells and rocks in it. It's just really awesome, beautiful. So cool. I love this. And I have another one too in pink and purple. I kind of like a fantasy ocean. It's really pretty. I should have brought that one in too. Maybe I'll show it tomorrow night. Now there's these little bases you can buy that's like a wood base that you set things like this on, and then it has a light strip so it shines light up through it, and then it's like a night light, or some cool light to put on your mantle or nightstand or whatever. And I kind of want to get some because I think these would look so cool on that. But I actually just have it on my shelf because it's in my store and I'm gonna sell it, but I like it so much I can't just leave it in a box. So I just set it out, and then I'll clean it up good when somebody buys it. But those are a couple of the items that I have for sale. They are in my store. I think I put the link to my store on my description in my homepage. You can go, if you click on the icon with my books on it, you can go to my store. Okay, so we are to chapter 6. A little recap. So for chapter 5, Kit and her aunt and her cousins went to church, and she could hardly stand it. It was 2 hours and she had to sit perfectly still, and it was miserable. And she never went to church in Barbados, and she's kind of this like wild, free spirit who's never lifted a finger to do anything for anybody but herself her whole life. So she's kind of like spoiled and selfish, but she's still, I don't know, to me she's quite likable, even though she's kind of a spoiled brat. And it's funny too, because I mean she just lost her grandfather, and that's hard, and she's went through a lot, and that's hard. But she's really entitled, you know what I mean? She just feels like, it, why would the family not just love to have her there? And she's this huge burden, like they don't have money and they don't have, and then she's kind of disrupting their lives, and it's this whole thing. And she feels like she's the one who's picked on, which is kind of funny to me. And everybody's that way. You only know what you're going through, right? And that's why empathy is to try to have a little understanding of what other people are going through. But yeah, she's kind of a funny girl. I get a kick out of her. Now to chapter 6, and we'll get started. Seriously. Okay. Here we go. Chapter 6. Reverend Jersham Bulkley laid down his linen napkin, pushed back his heavy chair from the table, and expanded his straining waistcoat, or waistcoat as they pronounced it a lot, in a satisfied sigh. A very excellent dinner, Mistress Wood. I warrant there's not a housewife in the colonies can duplicate your apple tarts. He had just better compliment that dinner, thought Kit. The preparation of it had taken the better part of 4 days. Wow. And we have microwave dinners these days. Every inch of the great kitchen had been turned inside out. The floor had been fresh sanded, the hearthstone polished, the pewter scoured. It's interesting because back in the days, they had, their a lot of their dishes and their silverware and things were made of if it was silverware and made of real silver tarnishes and pewter tarnishes. So if they had any type of mugs or anything like that made of pewter, they would take sand or something similar and they would scrub it with their fingers and the sand to take the tarnish off. so so taking care of the silverware and the pewter and things like that was a no little process. Like, it was a big deal. I mean, we have it pretty easy these days. We could sure be a lot more grateful, I think, than we are. The brick oven had been heated for 2 nights in a row, and the whole family had gone without sugar since Sunday to make sure that the minister's notorious sweet tooth would be satisfied. Well, Dr. Bulkley had been pleased, but had anyone else? Matthew Wood had eaten little and spoken scarcely a word. He sat now with his lips pressed tight together. Rachel looked tired and flustered, and even Mercy seemed unusually quiet. Only Judith had blossomed. In the candlelight she looked bewitching, and Reverend Bulkeley smiled whenever he looked at her. But the greatest part of his condescension, his condensation, he's over there, yeah, his, his condescension he had bestowed on Kit, once he had understood that her grandfather had been Sir Francis Tyler. He himself had visited Antigua in the West Indies, he had told her, and was acquainted with some of the plantation owners there. He went back to the subject now for the third time. So, young lady, your grandfather was knighted for loyalty by King Charles, you say? A great honor, a very great honor indeed. And I take it he was a loyal subject of our good King James as well? Why, of course, sir. And you yourself? You are a loyal subject also? How could I be otherwise, sir? Kit was puzzled. There are some who seem to find it possible, remarked the minister, staring meaningfully at a ceiling beam. See that you keep your allegiance. With an abrupt scrape of wood, Matthew pushed back his chair. Her allegiance is in no danger in this house, he announced angrily. What are you implying, Gershom? I meant nothing to offend you, Matthew, said the older man. Then watch your words. May I remind you, I am a select man in this town. I am no traitor. I said no such thing, nor did I mean it. Mistaken, Matthew. I hold to that, but not a traitor. Yet. I am mistaken, Matthew Wood challenged him, because I do not favor knuckling under to this new king's governor. Governor Andros was appointed by King James. Massachusetts has recognized that. Well, we here in Connecticut will never recognize it. Never. Do you think we have labored and sacrificed all these years to build up a free government only to hand it over now without a murmur? You can imagine how hard that would be. I mean, they went to this new land and they went out in the wild and they built up homes and, settlements and towns. And then as soon as years and years and years and lifetimes of hard work go into it, then, the government from England shows up and is like, okay, we're in charge now. Just give us your money, we'll tax you. And yeah, I mean, you can imagine how frustrating that would be. I say you are mistaken, growled Gershom Bulkley. Mark my words, Matthew. If you do not live to see the evil results, your children or their children will suffer. Call it what you will. This stubbornness can lead only to revolution, which it did. Matthew's eyes flashed. There are worse things than revolution. I know more about that than you. I was surgeon in the fort fight with the Indians. War is an evil, Matthew. Believe me, there can no good thing come of bloodshed. Who is asking for bloodshed? We ask only to keep the rights that have already been granted to us in the Charter. The two men sat glaring at each other across the table. Tears sprang to Rachel's eyes. Then Mercy spoke from the shadows. "I had looked forward to hearing Reverend Bulkeley read to us this evening," she said gently. Dr. Bulkeley sent her a gracious smile and considered. "I have to coddle this throat of mine," he decided, "but my young pupil here is a very exceptional reader. I shall pass the honor on to him." Grudgingly, Matthew Wood lifted the heavy Bible and placed it in John Holbrook's hand, and Rachel moved a pewter candlestick nearer to his elbow. John had been respectfully silent all the evening. Indeed, he had had little opportunity to be anything else, and he now seemed pleased out of all proportion at this slight notice from his master. Kit felt suddenly provoked at him. 1 week in Wethersfield seemed to have changed the dignified young man she had known on shipboard. Tonight he appeared to be a shadow, hanging on every word from this pompous, opinionated man. Even now he dared not assert himself, but held the Bible uncertainly in his hands and asked, "What would you have me read, sir?" "I would suggest Proverbs, 24th chapter, 21st verse," said the old minister with a canny gleam in his eye, which Kit understood as John began to read. "My son, fear the Lord and the king, and meddle not with them that are given to change, for their calamity shall rise suddenly, and who knoweth the ruin of them both?" There was a harsh sound from Matthew, checked in response to his wife's pleading eyes. John continued reading. As he read on, Kit forgot the meaning of the words and felt a stir of pleasure at the sound. John's voice was low-pitched but very clear, and the words fell with a musical cadence that was a delight. Every evening since she had come here, she had sat waiting with impatience for her uncle's monotonous voice to cease. Tonight, for the first time, she caught the beauty of the ancient Hebrew verses. It's interesting that's true. Even the most interesting subject or book or words can be so hard to listen to if they're read by somebody who doesn't know how to make it sound interesting. When the reading was finished, family and guests bowed their heads, and Reverend Bulkeley began the evening prayer. A little sigh escaped Kit. Her uncle's terse petitions were hard enough to endure. This prayer, she knew, would be a lengthy masterpiece. As the husky voice scraped inexorably on, she ventured to raise her head a little and was gratified to see that Judith, too, was peeking. But Judith's attention was not wandering. She was studying with deliberate appraisal John Holbrook's bent head and the delicate chiseled line of his profile against the firelight. Delicate, huh? He must be handsome. A phrase of Dr. Bulkeley's prayer caught Kit's attention again. "And bless our sister in her weakness and affliction." Whom did he mean? Heavens, was he talking about Mercy? Had the man no perception at all? How Mercy must be shriveling at the fulsome words. After a few days in this household, Kit had ceased to be aware of Mercy's lameness. No one in the family ever referred to it. Mercy certainly did not consider herself afflicted. She did a full day's work, and more. Moreover, Kit had soon discovered that Mercy was the pivot about whom the whole household moved. She coaxed her father out of his bitter moods, upheld her timorous and anxious mother, gently restrained her rebellious sister, and had reached to draw an uncertain alien into the circle. Mercy weak! Why, the man could not even use his eyes. When the prayer was ended, the thanks repeated, and the good night said, Rachel saw her guest to the door. She held out her hand to John Holbrook. "I hope you will come again," she said kindly. "We would like you to feel welcome in our house." John looked back to where Judith stood behind Mercy's chair. "Thank you, ma'am," he answered. "If I may say, I would be very happy to come again." As the heavy door finally closed, Matthew Wood turned fiercely toward his wife. "This is the last time," he pronounced, "that I will have Gershom Bulkeley under my roof." "Very well, Matthew," sighed Rachel, "but do not be too hard on him. Gershom is a good man, just set in his ways." He is a hypocrite and a whited sepulchre." Matthew's fist crashed down on the table. "And I'll have no more texts read at me in my own house." Wearily, the women set to work to clear the table, while Matthew raked up the fire in the hearth. All at once he straightened up. "There is another matter I forgot," he said. "Young William Ashby asked permission today to pay his respects to my niece." A spoon clattered from Judith's fingers. There was utter silence in the room as Rachel and both her daughters turned to stare at Kit. "You mean call on Catherine?" Aunt Rachel's voice was incredulous. That is what I said. But he has hardly seen her. Only for a moment after meeting. She was conspicuous enough. Kit felt her cheeks growing hot. Judith opened her mouth to say something, glanced at her father, and closed it again. I suppose we can hardly refuse, ventured Rachel. He is a member of the society, in good standing, and he has gone about it quite properly. His father is another king's man, said her husband. He proposed in council that we can join with Massachusetts. But what can we expect now that we harbor a royalist under our own roof? Bring a candle. Bring a candle, Rachel. We have wanted enough time. We have wasted enough time for one night. A constrained trio lingered after Rachel had climbed the stairs behind her husband. Mercy began quietly to make ready her own bed in the corner. A small wrinkle of concern marred her usually placid forehead. Well, I told you so, Judith finally burst out. I knew by the way he was staring at you after meeting. There was no use to pretend she didn't remember. Kit felt a small, pleasurable stir of curiosity. Do you know him, Mercy? I know about him, of course, admitted Mercy. Who doesn't know about him? Added Judith. Who hasn't heard that his father has 3 acres of the best land set aside and the trees all marked to build the house the moment Master Williams up his mind? And he was just about to make it up too when you came along. We never really knew that, Judith, her sister reminded her gently. We only thought so. All at once Kit remembered. That first morning when she was trying on the dress, Judith had said, Oh dear, she exclaimed in dismay. I don't want this William to come calling on me. Why, I've only seen him once, and I couldn't think of a word to say to him if he came. I'll tell Uncle Matthew so in the morning. Don't you dare say anything to father, Judith whirled on her. But if you, William never asked to call on me. I just said he was getting around to it. 'Tis not quite fair, really, Mercy considered soberly, to hold it against Kit, just because we thought, Oh, I'm not holding it against Kit, Judith said airily. Suddenly she tossed her head. As a matter of fact, Kit can have William with my blessing. I've changed my mind. I'm going to marry John Holbrook. That's the end of chapter 6. Quite a different time. It's interesting, in the time of, because this is before the revolution, right, and all of the, because things got really, really divided in the colonies before the revolution, and a lot of the people who were there were still loyal to the king and didn't want to be a separate nation. And so there were a lot of families torn apart, and it's hard. That's a hard thing, but it's kind of interesting too, because I've kind of been thinking about it. Imagine, people today are so divided in their political leanings. I mean, there's all these people, saying don't go to Thanksgiving dinner with your family if they're, on Democrat, or if they're Republican or conservative or whatever. And these families are separating themselves because of politics. It was a lot like that in that time, but a lot more intense because number one, they were dependent on each other to survive. I mean, the towns and the communities helped each other, grow crops and raise their barns, and the communities were really small. There were very few people who you could marry. Like, here's this young girl, and there's like three people in town that she can marry, right? or whoever, So there's not that many people, and they depended on each other and took care of each other. So for these close knit communities and these close families to be so divided, it was a really important thing to happen, and for America to form and to be the freest country, but imagine the people going through it at the time, the sort of division in communities and families, and how hard it would have been. It's interesting. I know there's so many stories and letters and in historical documents that you can read to kind of get a feel for it. And I'm fascinated with history. I always have been. So I've actually read a lot of Revolutionary War not only fictional novels, but based on fact novels, and also letters written by soldiers and family members. And, I'm fascinated by history. I've read a lot about the Holocaust, a lot of stories from Holocaust survivors and things like that. So I always have a tendency to try to put myself in the place at the time and imagine how it would be to be in that situation. You can see how hard it would be for Matthew Wood, he's worked so hard to build this life for his family, and even though he's quite a hard man, he obviously cares about his family and wants to take care of them, and he wants freedom, right? He doesn't want to work his whole life building something just to have the king send some governor in to just take it away. And so you can see why he's so upset about it. And then you have this girl Kit, who grew up wealthy, and she was, they thrived under the king, and she's completely loyal to him, and she can't understand how anybody could not be loyal to this king. Everything was great for her, and she was in Barbados, a whole different lifestyle. And then you have this girl Judith, who is the prettiest girl in town, and she's all this time she's thinking she could probably have whoever she wants, right? There's only a few men available to marry, and the one guy she wanted takes one look at this other girl who, isn't even as pretty as she is, and decides he wants her instead. So you can imagine how hurt and frustrated she would be, even though she's a little irritable and grumpy, maybe, but you can kind of see why she would feel a little frustrated. And you can kind of place yourself in everybody's shoes, and imagine what it would be like for each person in the story. I do that a lot, and I find it quite interesting. Anyway, I'm enjoying this book. I'm enjoying reading with whoever wants to come. I love you all, and if you come on here and I don't know you, I still love you. I have enough love for everybody. So thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by, and we will do chapter 7 tomorrow. Thanks.